So, without further ado, let's get started. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. George Ramirez is the star of the show tonight, and so I'm going to launch right into first describing how I know him, and then starting to ask him a bunch of questions. So, I've long been interested in how important it is for people like me and him and you and anybody to delay gratification. In other words, to hold off from the immediate appeal of something that might not be good for you. I am literally, as I speak to you, doing that right now. Because I was going to ask Lorraine to get me one of those cookies. And I thought, no, I'm not going to ask her because it's not going to be good for me. I literally this morning put on a suit and I said to my wife, are the pants running up a little too high because I've put on a little too much weight? She said, yes, they're too short. You can't wear that suit. So I'm wearing this one instead. So it's a problem that each of us faces in her or his own way all the time through life, whether it's cookies, drugs, spending money, as opposed to saving it. It's a fundamental economic problem, and what I discovered when I did a story about this for public television, those of you who don't know me, my main job is as an economics correspondent for the public television news program, the PBS News Hour on public TV. And what I discovered doing a story about delayed gratification is that if you know how or learn how to delay gratification at an early age, when people are followed over time, over a period of 30 years or more, the people who do better in life financially, and I mean significantly better, better enough so that you can see it, how much money they make, how much money they've saved, and so forth. The people who could delay gratification earlier in life do way better later in life. Now these experiments were only started in about the 1970s, something like that. Walter Michel's first.
Yep.
So we only have 40 years worth of experience, but these were little kids. I mean, kids 5, 6 years old, 4 years old. So they're in their 40s now. And there's one study in New Zealand of 10,000 people. So it's not like there's just a few examples and you kind of go, oh, well, maybe, maybe not. This is just statistically significant. That is, enough people are different older than the people who didn't delay gratification to make it absolutely ironclad true that if you learned how to delay gratification, you were financially, economically better off later on. Way later. So I learned about that a few years ago when I did a story about delaying gratification and its importance in terms of economics, which is to say saving as opposed to spending, taking the money you save, investing it, making your money work for you so that it grows, and for people like yourselves, and myself and George, investing in yourself by going to community college, for example, which is, after all, a huge cost. Not because it's out-of-pocket cost, it's pretty cheap that way, but you could be earning money at the time, with the time that you're spending here, what economics we call the opportunity cost. You have an opportunity to make money elsewhere, but you're going to community college instead. That's the cost of going to community college, is what you spend out of pocket, plus the opportunity cost, that is, the money You're leaving on the table because you're not working during the period of time you're going here. Okay. So I had done a story about that, and then I thought I really ought to go to the guy and do a story about the guy who really started all this research. And we're getting to George in just a second here. And that's a guy named Walter Mischel, teaches at Columbia University in New York. And he devised a way of testing. He's a psychologist, psychology professor. He devised a way of testing how well a kid can delay gratification. And the way he did it is something called the marshmallow test. How many people know what the marshmallow test is? Handful. So for the rest of you. The marshmallow test originally was done not just with marshmallows, and they were very small marshmallows, by the way, but also M&Ms, and I think cookies, maybe. And what he would do, and you can go online, go on the internet, and see kids taking this test. You leave you go, kids sitting at a table like this, you put down the treat, a little marshmallow, is where the name of the marshmallow test came from, and you say, hey, listen. And this is a kid, 4, 5, 6 years old, something like that. He did it with kids of various ages, but young kids. If you can not eat the marshmallow for how many minutes?
Like 10?
Yeah, something like 10 minutes. If you can, I'm going to leave the room. I'll come back. If you don't eat the marshmallow, you'll get a second marshmallow. You'll get 2. And the test is, can you resist? Can you delay the gratification of eating the marshmallow, right? Long enough to get a second one. That's the quality, that's the skill that predicts whether or not you're going to be successful financially later in life. Presumably because it shows whether or not you have the ability to not spend the money, to not jump at the prize, the gaudy object, the most attractive thing right in front of you, but to think longer term in terms of what's going to be good for you. Longer term rather than short. So I go to Walter Mischel and I read his book called The Marshmallow Test. And there's one star of the book, one person who is held up as the great example of, or a great example, but in the book, the great example of, not that you necessarily were good at it to begin with, but that you can learn how to resist the temptation. As you can see, I'm still learning with my problem with the cookies. And believe me, I'm still longing for the cookie. As I sit here, God is my witness. That's George Ramirez, who, right here, whose story we're now going to explore. So let's start with where you were, who you were. See, Yale was a senior now, right? Majoring in
Physics and history.
physics and history. So no, he's not majoring in, basket weaving or, some slouchy, subject. Where'd you grow up? And as a kid, if you were taking that marshmallow test, say when you were 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, how would you have done? Let's start there.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming out, and thank you, Paul, for having me, and thanks to Gateway for having me as well. I never thought I would be interesting enough to have a crowd of people listen to me, so this is actually pretty interesting. So I guess to answer your question, I was actually born in Ecuador, and I moved to the South Bronx when I was 5. And I guess in terms of like what would have happened if I took the test.
Yeah, if you,
Well, coming from the environment where I grew up, no one really kind of expected much of me, so I would say that if I had taken the marshmallow test when I was 5, 6, when I had moved to the States, I probably would have eaten the marshmallow. I mean, like no one, I mean, you're a little kid, right? You see a treat, you're given a treat, and what do you want to do? You want to eat it. And no one, I mean, I had great parents and stuff like that, but no one had ever told me, if you wait a little bit longer, good things will happen, because like, what kind of 5-year-old is going to understand that? At least I didn't. So yeah, I would have totally have eaten the marshmallow right then and there, probably not even waited.
and you start going to school in New York, and what kind of student are you at that point? 5, 6, 7? Are you primed? All your teachers are saying, hey, you're going to go to an Ivy League school when you grow up?
No. I mean, I could barely speak English. So, I mean, they probably said the complete opposite, and I didn't even understand what they were saying. But I was just kind of like I wasn't doing well just because I didn't know what was going on. I knew no English, so I kind of just stepped into a classroom in the Bronx, and they were just like, go to school. So no one was looking at me like, that kid has potential, or like, that kid's gonna go places. I was just like every other kid in the Bronx. No one really kind of expected anything of me.
Did they expect anything of your fellow students? I mean, were they cherry picking, that is, picking out kids who they thought, hey, that kid's got potential? I mean, was there any of that, or?
No, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with like New York City public schools. A lot of our teachers are not. Let's just say that they probably shouldn't be standing in a room full of kids because they're not necessarily the most encouraging people. So I'm sure there were students friends of mine that were doing well, but I never heard anyone, calling anybody out. If anything, it was a very negative place saying, you're too loud, shut up, or probably even to the point it's just like, you're probably not going to make it, and or stop trying. Those are things that I definitely heard in passing. So not the cherry picking thing, not really a thing.
So you're an indifferent student, or what kind of grades were you getting?
Oh yeah, I mean, I didn't care about school. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. So I was probably like the most apathetic little first, second grader you ever met. I mean, I was 6 or whatever, and all I wanted to do was do little kid things. I wanted to get out of school as soon as possible and go play outside in the fire hydrant over the summer and go, hang out with my friends and just.
You should explain it. Well, I don't know, maybe it's true in New Haven too.
Yeah.
But in New York City, it's hot, it's humid, it's terrible. So they open the fire hydrants and water comes out, and you run through the fire hydrant. That's what he's talking about.
It's a little bit weird, but yeah, it's just a way to cool down. You're just kind of playing with your friends and stuff. But yeah, I didn't really care about school. Who liked to do homework? I think I was a pretty indifferent little kid, so I never liked to do my work. I never really cared about doing my work.
And you were typical.
Yeah, that was just. If you looked at the people next to me, that's probably the same case. Everybody was just going into a building, going out, and then living their lives and just, hanging out with their friends. No one really applied themselves. No one really thought that they were gonna go anywhere. Everything was just a day by day. If I make it to the next grade, great. If I don't, then it was just it wasn't a very inspiring place at all. It was just very. The teachers didn't care, so the students didn't care, and I was definitely one of those students.
So what's the next step? I mean, what's the first step that gets you off that path?
Okay, well, after 4th grade, I enrolled at KIPP Academy Middle School, which is also in the Bronx. It was actually in the building right next to where I went to elementary school.
Why? Why did you apply? KIPP, explain what KIPP stands for.
Yeah. So stands for the Knowledge is Power program, and they're a network of free charter schools around the country that have now K through 12 programs and give college prep education to students in low-income neighborhoods.
And how did you wind up there? You're an indifferent student, you don't care, the teachers don't care, who cared?
Well, I guess, okay, so my sister had gone to KIPP prior to me, and I don't know, I just knew that she worked really hard and that she had a lot of homework, and so I guess it was my parents that kind of cared a little. To be honest, I don't really know how I ended up there because I think my sister was the one my sister's the smart one in the family, like, she's got it.
So how did she wind up there?
So I think, because she was the smart one, she was a little bit more motivated than I am, she was recommended to go to school.
So there is a cherry picking, that is there is somebody who says, hey, she's got potential.
Yeah.
Nobody said that about you.
Not that I remember. No, I was, by the time I got to like 4th grade and I knew how to speak English and all that stuff, I wasn't a bad student, but I wasn't like a great student either. So no one had really cherry picked me in my opinion. My sister was the one who just was amazing. So she got to go to KIPP, and because I'm her brother, I was able to participate in the lottery and go to middle school there.
Now, for a second here, one of the arguments against or skeptical of charter schools like KIPP, KIPP, right? Knowledge is Power program, that's the acronym. Is that they're lotteries, that it's the luck of the draw, that most people do not get in, and that it's just pure chance, those few who do. What's the ratio of people who apply to people who get in? Do you know what it was when you were a kid, or no?
To be honest, I really don't know. I was in the 8th graduating class from KIPP, so by then we were pretty well established, so it was pretty competitive, or at least there were a lot of applicants there, so it wouldn't have been, I wasn't like guaranteed to get in.
But lottery, not on the basis of your IQ or anything.
Yeah, no, it's just totally like, it's like if you were to put your name in a hat and the principal of the school stood in front of you, shook the hat and just picked your name out, and then that's how you got to go. So, yeah.
So what age are you when you start KIPP?
10.
And what do? This, you can go online and see the story I did with George and Walter Michel, the professor from Columbia, about, and we shot at his school, at this KIPP school George went to, so you can see all this online, but for the purposes of this, what happened when you got there? What did you see or experience?
Right. Well, going to KIPP was like the complete opposite of going to my elementary school. For the first time ever, people checked my homework. My teachers were like nice to me, it was super weird. They enforced like certain behavior, so they wanted us to be quiet in class, and they called us out when we were doing things wrong.
That didn't happen at your other school?
Well, not in a productive way. I mean, if you have like a room of loud kids, you just want to tell them to shut up, and that's like verbatim what our teachers would say, like just straight up, shut up, because like nothing. They were like, please be quiet, or it was not a really great place. But at KIPP, they were very strict, but they would tell us, like please display some self-control and lower your voices, or be a good teammate and help the rest of your class understand that we have to work together efficiently. So they enforced all these different character traits while they were teaching us in order to like help us behave a certain way, and to be a little bit more understanding of things like delayed gratification, though they didn't really call it that.
Did they do the marshmallow test for you? I mean, or something like that?
Well, I mean, I think they did it in pretty much in every aspect. Like that's kind of the basis of how they teach character there.
Which they call character, right?
Yes, so we have like two skills that we learn, and it's academics and character, and they always say characters. It's 51% character, 49% academics. Just, you know, learning these skills the character skills is just a little bit more important than learning the skills to be a good student.
And what are the character skills?
There's a ton, but the ones that we really emphasize are optimism, grit.
Grit, what is grit?
Grit is like perseverance, so it's just like the ability to overcome some sort of obstacle. So if you ever have like a challenge facing you or something that's really, really difficult, you do whatever it takes to get through it or to accomplish what you want to do at the end.
So how do you learn something? I mean, how do you learn grit?
That's a terrific question. I think, well, it's weird because they just kind of like make it happen, but I think what they ended up doing is just they intentionally made academics a little bit more challenging than they had to be. So, you know, and they always taught us that it wasn't just about like yourself, it was also about working with your team. So they made it so that each person had different challenges that they had to face. So,
Can you remember an example of a challenge you had to face? Where they made something harder for you than it might otherwise or ought otherwise to have been?
so, well, this was more of a lesson in being honest, but I think
Okay.
I learned grit through it. So in 7th grade, I got in really, really big trouble because I forged my parents' signature on a test that I had to give back to my teachers. So all our tests had to be signed by our parents and then give them back to our teachers to make sure that our parents had seen it. And it's not like I had like an awful grade, I just like forgot, but we would get in trouble if we didn't have them signed. So I was, trying to be a little sneaky student. I was just like, okay, I got my parents' signature, hand it in. And of course, that's like the day that the teacher decides to like carefully check every single signature, and it was like, hell broke loose. I, was sent to the hallway. My teacher was, like preaching at me at like what I'd done wrong, and of course, like all my teachers had heard that I got in trouble. So I think that I learned grit through that because all my teachers were very blatantly saying, oh, like we can't trust you. You have to like rebuild that trust that we had in you, and you're really gonna have to work hard to get that back. And I think even though that's teaching you, that was mostly teaching me not to forge a signature because in real life that's probably not a good idea, but also in just to like be honest, but having to overcome the fact that my teachers were mad at me and they were disappointed, and having to work hard to build their trust was definitely a lesson in grit and just having to push past the obstacles and move on and find a way to make it better.
One of the things I saw in the KIPP school that George went to that I videotaped, you can see online, is that the very first class that they teach now in your school is literally the marshmallow test. They give the marshmallow test to kids in school to begin to impress upon them the importance of waiting as opposed to, not waiting, to jumping at the opportunity. And that's the first thing they do in the class that's called character. They literally put the marshmallow test up on a slide, just like what you're seeing behind us here, and start teaching the skill, if you want to call it that, of learning to wait. Now they weren't doing that in your day, or no?
Yeah, they weren't doing that. The character education curriculum at KIPP has just changed a lot over time. We had different classes, like we had leadership classes when we were in 8th grade, and they kind of touched on those skills, but we didn't have like a class set out for like, this is how you learn how to be a good person. We didn't have that.
Well, and it's only that first class, I believe, that
Okay.
they teach, that they do the marshmallow test at that point. But the key thing that the guy who devised the test, this guy, Walter Mischel from Columbia University, the key thing that he wrote his recent book called The Marshmallow Test, which I would, and George, as I say, is featured, and which I would highly recommend to people. The key reason he wrote it is to explain to people like me, George presumably doesn't need it, you, everybody, what are the insights that he and researchers have learned from seeing how kids resist the marshmallow? What tricks do they use? What techniques do they use? How do they learn this skill, which turns out to be utterly crucial in your material life? That's the point of the book. That's why he wrote the book. And that's the point of the KIPP schools, right? Is to try to not just assume, okay, some kids are good at it, some kids are bad at it. Well, luck of the draw, maybe you hit the lottery and you happen to be good at it. Because you weren't particularly good at it. I mean, when I interviewed you for this PBS story, you said you weren't particularly good at this at all. So how'd you learn?
Well, that's the thing. It was just like our teachers made sure to emphasize that every single choice we made had some sort of long-term effect. So can I give an example?
Yeah, no, please, no.
The example that I gave you. So,
Yes.
all right. So imagine like a 10-year-old version of me decided a school that like didn't really teach me much about character or what it means to be a good person, right? Day one of summer school at KIPP, I go into math class and my teacher starts assigning a seat. So it's just like, like you sit here, you sit there, blah, blah, blah. And she was doing it by alphabetical order by last name. So my last name's Ramirez, and like obviously I was gonna sit in the back because like my name starts with an R. So as soon as she called Ramirez, I was just like, damn, and like, yeah, I was just like not being respectful. So I was mad that I was sitting in the back, and that I had to wait so long to stand up and get my seat.
So what did you say exactly?
I stuck with teeth. I was just like, damn. Yeah, I know.
Quietly, loud, yell it out?
No, it was just kind of like when you're trying to whisper, but you're trying to also let your teacher know what you're feeling, It's kind of like that tacit, you're kind of being like, like you're whispering it loud, so they can hear you. Just, damn. But she heard me. I wasn't very subtle when I was 10. So it was audible, right? And my teacher was just like, okay, George, if you don't want to take your seat now, you can just wait in the back until everybody gets your seat, and then you can sit down. Oh, and I was so mad because I was just like, what? I'm gonna get the seat anyway. Why are you gonna make me sit later as opposed to just getting a seat now? And then,
So you thought it was an outrage?
oh yeah, I just thought this was ridiculous. Like I'm gonna sit and like I'm a student. I should have like my seat in the classroom. I'm entitled to like my seat. So I was really angry.
Did you say anything?
No, I had this really bad habit of just like sucking my teeth whenever I was mad. So I was just like, damn. It's just like that. I was.
Let me hear this sucking of the teeth.
There you go. Yeah. Do y'all do that? Is that a thing? People, right? When people look at you like,
How many people here suck their teeth like that?
oh,
You got a good.
right? Whenever you're just like you're like a little mad.
I myself do not suck my teeth like that. I think when I'm trying to clean my teeth, I do that, and my wife tells me it's a terrible habit. But I
I've
don't.
never done that in that context, and apparently.
Well, I'm much older than you.
Okay, so good for me. Yeah, I mean, different uses of it. But anyway, so my teacher was just like, you can wait, and I had to wait until all my friends sat down, and she was just like, now that you've learned to appreciate your seat, you can take a seat. And I was just like, what is this lady doing? What is she trying to tell me right now? Like, I'm just trying to go to school and get out. But it was the first time someone did that to me was the first time I realized that like there are things that you do now that affect you right after you do them. So you kind of have to like think a little bit. I didn't realize this at the time, but it was the first time that someone had called me out for doing something.
That there were consequences for what you did.
Yes. Yeah. So there, every time I did something, there was a consequence to it. That's a perfect word. And a consequence doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just like there's just going to be some sort of reaction right afterwards. And I just like had never really been taught that before, especially at school. So I think that was the first time I learned that, yes, I may not like my seat, I may not like the situation that I'm in, but if I wait a little bit longer, it's going to be okay because then I won't get in trouble. And that's pretty much like how they would apply these lessons throughout the day. It wasn't like they would sit us down and tell us like, delayed gratification is X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 blah. Because no one, what middle school is going to listen to that, right? So it was through the everyday actions of just like being a student that you learned that if you wait a little bit, good things might happen. So, yeah.
Now, one thing I asked you after you told me that story, I was interviewing you here in New Haven half a year ago, something like that. Maybe a little less, but yeah, something like that. I said to you, and it seems to me this is a crucial, just absolutely most important question. Could anybody, I said to you, from your background, that is your part of the Bronx, South Bronx, in that previous school of yours before you got into KIPP, could anybody do what you wound up doing as a result of your KIPP training? Also, because of course the obvious question is like the way you talk about your sister. Well, she's so smart. Well, of course, if she's so smart, somebody cherry-picked her, using my term, somebody picked her out and went, hey, oh, she's so smart, and we'll get her on a different track. That was not the story for you. You kind of slipstreamed in behind her. I mean, you kind of on her coattails or something.
Basically, yeah.
So the question I put to you is, I did put to you and put to you now again, is, can anybody learn this, or is this just for, the gifted but neglected? Are you just gifted who was neglected? You're just one of the smartest kids in Ecuador.
Yeah.
Your parents showed the initiative to come to America. We know your sister is gifted by your own admission or testimony.
Yeah.
So, or could anybody do it? And you really surprised me with the answer. I'm still not sure I believe it, but your answer was?
Yes, I honestly believe that anyone can learn how to. Everybody can learn how to have delayed gratification. I'm not sure how the correct term would be, but everybody can. I think everybody's capable of learning about consequences and like making choices and how they will affect you in the future. And the reason I say that is just because of a lot of the people that I went to school with, who again, they all may have gone through the KIPP program, but they were kids that were just like me, some that behaved better, some that behaved a lot worse.
Lottery again, picked by
picked by a lottery, who you would just see a complete transformation in their 4 years. I mean, it's not something that I learned in a day. It was something that came over time, obviously. And there are some of my friends who got in trouble all the time, and then just like wouldn't get it, and maybe even took them after middle school to kind of learn that you had to wait, and that there were better things to come if you just like try a little harder or wait a little bit longer. So I've just seen it myself, and I've seen it not just at my school, but at other schools that have similar like character education programs. So I believe that if you place a child like in the right environment and kind of enforce these sorts of character skills on them, over time they're learning to appreciate things, and that there are, rewards anyway.
But the way I asked you the question on camera was, could any of the kids from your background, if they had gone to KIPP, wound up going to Yale and being history and what, physics?
Yeah.
Physics major. And that's where I was extremely skeptical. And you said to me,
Yes, I mean, right? Yes is my answer. I think a lot of, there's a lot of kids, well, there's not a lot of kids, but because it's Yale's school to get into. But I think there's a lot of kids that I know, especially like some of my friends that went to KIPP with me, who again grew up in the South Bronx, grew up in like low-income neighborhoods, children of immigrant parents.
always immigrant parents or not just immigrant parents?
Not just immigrant parents, yeah. I'm just trying to give you like another similar version of me, but I had, black friends whose like families had been here for a while, and like Latino friends who had also been here for a while, and people like me who had moved from one country to another. People who kind of grew up in similar environments to mine, and they're all like attending colleges, or they're all, trying to figure out a way to go back to school, or they're working, or, they have kind of like their life together, and they're in the process of getting their life together. So I don't think it's just like I don't think I was just special or something like that. That was something that I've seen myself and a lot of the people that I know be able to do that. And I'm not saying that they're all going to be history and physics majors, because not everybody, people who get to higher ed and get to colleges don't necessarily like science or don't like history. They might be studying other things. But when you're in the right place and you can like develop your passions and find out what you're good at and learn about all these different character skills, and you can learn that if you work hard now, good things will happen later, you can definitely end up in positions like mine, similar to mine, exactly mine though, I like to make them a little unique, so.
Well, so do we all. We even probably all want to think you're a
We all are, right?
But you really believe, I'm going to press the point only because, with a tone of skepticism, but I don't know that I'm actually skeptical, because I think you sort of turned me around on this issue, or you certainly helped turn me around on the issue. You really believe it's not that there was something, that you were this diamond in the rough?
Nope. Maybe I was, but I don't think I was like that kid has potential. I was like, I don't think it's because they specifically thought I had something already inside of me.
No, I believe that, but the question is,
Yeah.
Did they happen upon a diamond in the rough in you? Did they just happen to find a kid who turns out to have had all kinds of hidden skills? The stories you were telling me before, and you were just telling now, about other kids in your class who were screw-offs, right?
Right, yeah.
And they're doing well.
Yeah, I have like, I can give you like examples of kids that I'm friends with, I'm trying to think, a lot of like, my really good friends, one of my friends, Ernest, he goes to, I don't know if I should give out his name, but, well, anyway, he goes to Baruch College in New York, and he like, used to get in trouble all the time, especially for like...
This is a school that specializes in business.
Yeah. And he, was...
And a very good school.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome school. And college, right? But he would get in trouble all the time, and would have to go stand in the back, and didn't get to go on the trips because he behaved like badly. And sure, that took him time to like realize that he could, that he had to be more aware of his choices and realize that more good things were to come. And he grew up like 2 blocks away from me too. And now he's in college, and he's at a really good school too, and studying business and doing really, really well. I've had other friends who may have had some little bumps along the way, but they're also kind of learning, or they have learned a little bit later that they can also go make the most of their lives. So I've had friends of mine that were also in similar situations, had to take time off school, but with like kind of like learning about having to persevere and learning that good things will happen if you just wait and do the right thing, they're like gone back to school and they've gone, and you know, they're in the process of graduating as well. So, you know, everybody has like their own unique path, but everybody who I went to school with eventually learned to wait for the marshmallow, basically, right? They learned that their actions have consequences, and it's not like they all went to Yale, but you know, they all are in a position to like make their own choices in their life that allow them to like be successful in their own way.
Now, so I'm sitting here, I'm a smart guy, went to college, spent a few years in graduate school, successful career. But I'm sitting here and I'm honestly thinking, of course, I'm also 70 years old, so I'm not likely to take a physics course at Yale. I'm definitely not likely to because I wouldn't dare. But that's the motivation for the question, which is, do you think that all of us here, that we could, if given the right amount of grit training, gratification delay training, marshmallow training, could we pass a physics course at Yale?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that's the case because delayed gratification also applies to like your schooling. You know, it's like, I'm sure, I mean, you know, we're all students. It's you want to take it. You have a midterm where you have a test, right? And you can either like go out, you can hang out with people, or you can study, do as well as you can on the exam, and then do your thing later, right? So, you know, depending on if you wanted to take a physics class at first, you know, you would have learned the skills that, like, if you study now, you're probably going to get a good grade. So, you know, depending on if you want...
I don't care about a good grade, I just want to pass.
You want to pass, yeah. I mean, trust me, I'm not, like, getting A's at Yale, so... I'm just trying to graduate. So, just being straight up. But, yeah, you could totally, like, if you were to enroll in the class and you had the background in, like, being aware that do things now so they could be a little bit easier later, you would definitely be able to pass, at least.
I have to tell one story, I have to be careful about this because I can't reveal. I heard a lecture from somebody who is a professor at an Ivy League school. This person is a professor of physics. Associate professor, that's the next step before full professor. This was just a week ago. And this person was dazzling lecture. I happen to know somebody who was the teacher of this person. I figured out,
Okay.
I mean, because I know where this person had gone to school. I heard where the person had gone to school. And so I called my friend and said, hey, you know so-and-so. And my friend, who is a professor of physics at Harvard, said, oh yeah, that person failed quantum mechanics. But I worked with the person over the summer, I talked to the professor, and this now Ivy League professor, as an undergraduate, did the problem sets and worked through the problems that the person had, finally passed with getting special dispensation, right? Special treatment, but still.
Right. That's part of the process. Awesome, but...
No, go ahead.
Right, it's just like, I think part of like delayed gratification is also like you know, even if you get extra help, that's part of it, you know, like you're working extra hard and you're asking for help now so that you can do well later. Doesn't mean that you're like, it's not like it doesn't qualify as like delayed gratification. You going out of your way to like work hard now to succeed later is definitely still the same thing.
So, I mean, part of it is asking for the help, in other words.
Right. It's just, you have to like learn how to push yourself. You have to learn you have to do things that aren't easy at the moment in order to do well later. I mean, I know I keep like saying the same thing over and over again, but that's exactly it, you know? You have to find the different resources, you have to like ask for help, you have to look for the right people, maybe take some extra time. Even though it might be hard at the beginning, it might be hard for a few months, but that effort definitely like manifests itself into something better later.
There's a way of thinking about human behavior that is now commonplace. I mean, that is common, conventional wisdom in psychology. And that is that each of us, me, George, every single one of you, is not, the term is a unitary self. That is not a single self. There's no single Paul. There's no single George. I don't know. There's no single Lorraine. We are, each of us, a whole bunch of different impulses that presumably we have to different degrees, that come as a result of evolution. Our appetite just for food, let's say, or for exercise, or anything else. Some of us for drugs. I mean, you know, whether it's alcohol, which I had a couple of drinks, a drink and a half before coming here tonight. Other drugs, whatever, coffee, sugar. So even sub-appetites, that is, appetites for specific things. But we're this group of impulses, all of us, and one way to look at it is that the impulse that wins at any given moment, the cookie that I wanted to have and still want to have, but didn't win, there's always a competition going on within us among these different selves or these different impulses, call it whatever you want. And the way in which we learn how to do those things which are best for the organism, don't even call it the self, the body and soul that is Paul, or the body and soul that's George or Lorraine, is that we develop the habit of doing those things. We develop good habits, I guess is the best way to put it. And that's what they're doing in KIPP, right?
Yes. They're doing that every day just by, you know, how do I explain it? They're doing that every day just because they're always persistent. They're always going to be calling you out on, or like giving you constructive criticism on how to become a better person. There's no one moment where they're kind of falling back and letting you live and whatever. They're always consistently going to make you think about your choices and the consequences, and therefore you build good habits out of that.
And so in that way of looking at the world, which is how I have that's the way I have adopted of trying to behave and of looking at the world. It's always a struggle, as the cookie makes clear. I'm not joking about the cookie, right? There's always a struggle going on, but what you're trying to do is develop the habit that pays off well enough for you, either because somebody's slapping your hand or explaining it to you over and over again when you're a kid, or later in life when you have to impose it on yourself, do it for yourself, you make it worthwhile enough so it's better to do the thing than to not do it. So I'll end with this and then we'll go to Q&A. I'll see what you think of this too. So here's my habit. So I figured, so I have I don't know if you can see it, but I have a scar that goes all the way up here because I had anterior cruciate ligament repair back in 1980, and they scooped out the cartilages, and so my knee was totally shot. So I finally found out about 10 years ago that the best thing to do for this is to do knee bends. Because it stabilizes, it's better than lifting weights. It's doing this. Now, how do I get myself to do that enough times every day? So what I devised myself, I brush my teeth while I'm doing this, and I brush with my left hand because I want to use my left hand. And of course, I'm old, so I'm also keeping my balance. So I'm doing four things, right? I'm strengthening my quadriceps, I'm using my left hand, I'm brushing my teeth, and I'm balancing. And I've built that habit into my life now. As you can see, I'm not bad at it. And that's kind of what they did at KIPP for you guys, right? It's just building the habits that are going to serve you well later on.
Exactly.
All right, so let's take some questions now, if we can. Yeah, sorry.
Have you
to
ever
attack
developed a enjoyment for grit and a delay of gratification where you notice yourself actually eager to do it more because of understanding what you'll get in the end?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think after a while, you do start realizing that the consequence or like the reaction is so good, or like comes out in your favor if you kind of persevere through it, or you fight through it, or you kind of wait a little bit longer, that it becomes much more worthwhile. So that I think that's how the habit develops, because over time you start realizing, you know what, I'm gonna stay in, and I'm gonna study, and I'm gonna get a good grade, and then it's just like, oh, I did that for 4 midterms in a row, and my grades are pretty good. You know what? I'm kind of about that life. Like I'm gonna keep doing that. You know. So, you know, sometimes of course it's a little disappointing, but most of the time you're just you kind of like enjoy the process because you know what's gonna come. You know, the good thing about delayed gratification is that statistically speaking, it actually, you know, gets you something good in the long run. So it's hard to obviously enjoy studying, but like you know it's worth it, so it's kind of like it's worthwhile. So it's a little bit enjoyable. Does that answer the question? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there are, you're proud when you succeed at it, even if the payoff isn't as great as you might have hoped. I demonstrate this bending thing to you, and you can all see how I'm kind of, strutting my stuff here, because look at what I can do, even though it's ludicrous. I mean, right? The guy's brushing his teeth, well, doing knee bends, but
it's gonna make your knee better.
Yes, and I haven't had a problem. This knee has not ached. Now, I also wear a brace, but I play tennis, and this knee has not ached or hurt me in a decade. It's insane for somebody who's had as much surgery and had the cartilage scooped out, which nobody does anymore, but back in 1980 they did that. So yes, I have a constant reminder of how delaying the gratification by just not brushing my teeth or not doing the knee bends pays off. Please.
I was wondering, do you see like doing your homework as someone like similar to balance your budget each month? You hate balancing your budget, you think about putting off the later, but then you say, it's got to be done. So once you do it, you feel better. Now it's behind you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a very good way of putting it. Like financially speaking, it applies to like anything, So, yeah, it's just like you think about what doing things now will help you with better. So it's just like, oh, let me look at how I'm using my money, or like let me look at how I'm budgeting, or all that stuff. It's kind of the same thing. So, because if you're aware of that stuff now, if let's say you need more money for emergency or something, like it'll be there. So, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think it kind of applies to everything. It's not just like with schoolwork. It's or like like physical, like you're like being physically good to yourself and like treating yourself, but like in all aspects of life, it's good to take care of things earlier and just be more aware of how that can affect you later. Yeah.
There's a great example in public policy. if you don't take care of a pothole early, the pothole costs you more later. It's just the nature of a pothole, that more water fills in, then it expands when it turns to ice, then it contracts when it gets back to water. The stresses cause cracks, and the pothole, because gets much, much bigger. So you're way better off, we as a society are way better off filling the pothole right away. But as you all know from New Haven in particular, but it's certainly true in Boston as well, we don't fill the pothole. We're saving the money, right, in the short term. And we're costing ourselves more and screwing ourselves in the long run. Lorraine mentioned this Social Security book that we're going to be talking about in a couple of weeks, me and one of my two co-authors here. So, and this thing is a runaway bestseller now. I'm proud to say, but it's also accurate. It's number 3 bestseller in the entire Western Hemisphere at the moment, and the numbers 1 and 2 are coloring books, kids' coloring books. So of serious books, this is literally the number 1 bestseller at the moment, called Get What's Yours. What's the premise of the book? Premise of the book is simply get what's yours, that is maxing out your, the secrets to maxing out your Social Security. That's the full name of the book. It's just telling you how to manage the Social Security system. It's exactly the same, almost exactly the same, as keeping a budget. It's telling you the rules and telling you what you ought to be doing if you're a certain age, your wife, depending on a whole bunch of things. If your kid is disabled, there are almost 3,000 rules in the Social Security system, so nobody can be expected to know them all. And so what most people do is what you were talking about doing with a budget. You just, you sweep it under the rug, you put it in the closet. It's too anxiety provoking, it makes you too anxious, right? So you don't deal with it. And this book is this huge success, largely, or at least significantly, because it is a kind of easy, there's some humor in it, and so forth, way of helping you deal with something that you know will be better for you in the long run if you know how to do it. That's all. And that's the same thing we're talking about in every aspect of life, whether it's not having the cookie, learning how to maximize your Social Security, learning how to go to Yale and be successful at it, or literally anything else. It's going to be good for you in the long run.
I had kind of 2 questions.
Yeah.
Well, first a comment.
Well, there's one
Number
more.
1, I am going to have a cookie. But number 2,
Well, you can afford to, Lorraine.
no, I don't think so. Number 2, the question I have is, how long did it take you to develop these habits? Because, like they say for, quote, habits, it's 1 week before it becomes a habit. You have to do it consistently. But I mean, in studying, you've obviously got to do it for a lot longer. That's my number 1 question. And then number 2, if your sister's the smart one, what is she doing? Like, you're a double major at Yale, so how is she the smart one? So it's a 2-part question.
Okay, sorry, your first question was?
How long does it take?
Right, okay. Well, I don't, see, this is kind of like the tricky part about delayed gratification, is that it's definitely teachable, but I think it takes experience for people to learn it right away. So, for some people it takes, I don't think it's like a week-long process. You definitely learn how to do this over time. I think for me personally, I was able to understand that really, really fully by the time I left KIPP, by 8th grade, because
That's how many years?
it was by the end of my 4th year, or by the middle of my 4th year at KIPP. And that was mostly because I finally got to see the big picture, the big fruit of all my work that I'd done there. So, I came into KIPP and I wasn't the best student, but then they taught me, work hard, or think about your choices before you make them, and good things might happen. Their thing was if you do good things happen. If you do bad things happen. And of course I didn't really understand this, I knew it you know, being quiet or like doing my homework or studying, but it's just like, okay, so like what's all that gonna get me in the long run? But by the time I got to 8th grade, you know, I was getting like really good grades, and we didn't have the KIPP high school back then, so they encouraged our students to apply to a lot of private schools around the city. And I decided, they told me to apply to boarding school, and I got accepted into boarding school by the end of 8th grade. So I think that was like the moment when I really kind of understood what it was and how it came to be, because I knew that 4 years of hard work, 4 years of waiting for the marshmallow got me into like the best high school I could. And I understood what that was. So for some people, it probably takes 2 years. For some, it takes 4. Others, like for some of my friends who really struggled a little bit after KIPP, but that got back on that right path, it took, you know, years into high school. But I think it's definitely something they can learn. So it kind of depends on like on your experience and like what you decide, the choices you decide to make.
And, you know, I just want to say, Lorraine, where did you go? Oh, there you are. I've had a discussion with a very famous psychologist at Harvard, Jerome Kagan, and he said, look, the key to this is a KIPP-like experience where it's not a week, it's not a month, it's not even a year, it's constant. And he pointed out it's a constant, you know, a learning over a long period of time, and years is a long period of time. So look at Head Start. Head Start's a fantastic program, but what happens, the effects, the positive effects as measured of Head Start are in the early years, right away. And then if you go back, this is just Jerome Kagan's argument, but I believe it, if you go back to the environment in which you're not getting the kinds of reinforcement that you get when you're at KIPP, then you fall back into the old habits, which are the bad habits, which are the habits that undermine what we're talking about as the desired effect. The other question was your sister.
Oh, yeah.
So what is she, a nuclear
My
physicist?
sister, no, my sister.
Also president or something?
Well, I think my sister, one, she's a smart one, but I also think she's the grittiest person that I know. She is currently working as an admissions officer for the boarding school that she went to, and she's also getting her master's in. She's getting her master's in some, I forget, I'm a really bad little brother. But she's getting her master's, which is like pretty cool. And she's going to school full time and like working full time. I don't really know how she does it. And she's just like super intelligent and, you know, is like up for promotion even though she started going to school like this year. So it's just like, she's just like knows how to do everything, and she's just always been like the really, really smart one. And she's also just like the hardest working person I know, and just.
But does she enjoy herself? You know, one thing I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, and I imagine other people are thinking too, well, wait a second, what kind of a life is this? You know, if you're studying all the time and you're hardworking and you're, you know, I mean, really, we're only on Earth for a little while. We're going to just be, you know, nose to the grindstone the whole time?
No, I mean, I think, well, one, I think she enjoys herself. You know, she's like happy and married and like, you know, lives in a nice place and, you know. So, from what I get, she's a pretty smiley person, so I think she's doing good. But you're right, it's just like how, like, is having delayed gratification or understanding what that is going to be something that detracts you from just like chilling out and like living your life, right? And I think that also, I mean, I think you could also look at delayed gratification as like a balance, right? So I like to give the same analogies because those are the ones that are realistic to me, but you know, I do work hard a lot at school, obviously, but as a reward, you know, I get a good grade, but then I give myself the liberty to like celebrate my accomplishments, and that's something that's like also super duper important. Is to like when you do something well, like pat yourself on the back and like give yourself a thumbs up because like you worked hard for it, right? So yeah, it's difficult and you have to be persistent, but you also part of like what you get out of it is the ability to like celebrate yourself and like your accomplishments. So then you do things that make you happy.
Are you happier now, do you think, than you were as a kid before KIPP?
Oh my, yeah. I mean, remember I was telling you I was like super empathetic? I'm like happy and like care about things and like care about people and want to help people and, you know, I would say I'm a lot happier, which is funny because like I was a little kid and I'm like have responsibilities, but you know, I enjoy my responsibilities because I can handle them. So, yeah.
Please.
I have two questions. One is just a quick one. I don't know if either of you are familiar with, what is his name? He wrote Outliers.
Malcolm
Malcolm
Gladwell.
Gladwell. He talks about a school. Is that the school you went to, or
Yes.
that type?
Yes, in fact, the student that he refers to is like one of my best friends who's like a year younger than me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a wonderful book, and
It's a great book. Yeah.
the other question is referring to immediate gratification. I had read an article that said nowadays young children are actually learning the opposite by video games, playing video games, and being so intent on that and constantly getting that immediate reinforcement. I was wondering if you had any feelings about, do you think that's true or false?
Huh. Oh, another really good question. See, it's hard for me to speak in a first-person point of view because I like was really bad at video games growing up, so I just kind of never did that.
Maybe that's the secret to your success, actually.
No, probably. You know, don't play video games, then you're sad. I guess. I mean, I guess it makes sense, like logistically. You know, you play your game well, you like beat whoever you gotta beat, and then you move a level up, and that takes not that long of a time. So I suppose, but I'm sure there's also like challenges to video.
I'm going to interrupt you because
Yeah.
you don't know. I play video games because I play with my grandson, and I've been tracking this the whole time. You know, a typical video game. I mean, how many people here play video games? It's got to be people who know more about this than I do. Yeah. All right. But I mean, any number of video games where it takes 11, 12 hours to go through all the different. You know, if you're talking about role-playing games, for example. I mean, they're utterly immersive, they're challenging, there's anything but immediate rewards in some of them, sure.
Yeah.
But then there's the issue of the levels and how high you go. There's a fantastic app called Motion Math, which for those of you who have kids, I strongly recommend. And Motion Math teaches little kids how to, I'll demonstrate it here while I'm talking. And Motion Math teaches you how to do fractions and things like that with fun games that yes, they play to the immediate gratification, but they also play to your long-term understanding of things. It's in my games folder, and I can't ever find my games folder. So this may not, oh, there it is, hold on a second. So here's Motion Math, and here it is, and I don't know if you can see it, and you learn how you manipulate that little ball there. You see, you're learning how to do it, and now and there in the middle, see, and now it gives you a fraction, and you have to say where on the number line the fraction is. I'm not going to do it because I don't know where it is. And then you get a positive reinforcement, you know. But this goes up 22 levels. And so you're learning, yes, immediate gratification. You asked, yeah. Yes, immediate gratification, and yet long-term learning. So combining the two. And for some of the role-playing games, in fact, if anything, it is reinforcing a much longer process of learning. Some physical learning, you know. I'm still terrible at this. I can't do the damn controller worth a damn. But some of it, thoughtful, figuring out where to go, how to go, what to do, what happens when this happens, what do you do, and so forth. So I think it cuts both ways.
Can I just add a little
Yeah,
bit to
please.
that? I think also it's just like, maybe video games are doing this sort of thing, but it's also not, video games are also not going to be the thing that teaches you delayed gratification, because you know you need to be in an environment where you kind of like learn how to process what that means. So if if all of us play video games, like that doesn't necessarily mean we'd all understand delayed gratification. We have someone, let's say, like coaching us through the game, or like helping us along and telling us, hey, if you like what this means, and how you can like apply it to real life, then I think that's what makes the difference, because otherwise you're just doing, I don't know, from my experience, the few times I played video games, it's just like you just play your game, and yeah, you feel good after you're doing it, but you don't really understand how that's like an applicable thing.
And I have a project which I've never gotten off the ground, but I've had it for a number of years, which is to do a video game that I call Future Self in virtual reality, because virtual reality is coming, where yourself is morphed into the future. And I did a story about this on the PBS NewsHour where I was kind of morphed. So you're making yourself old, where you just make yourself older. I'm sure a number of you have seen the apps where you can already do that. And then the person is put through, or you as the role-playing person is put through a whole variety of things where there are consequences. If you saved or didn't save, and that's true of video games even now. But the idea would be to design something whose whole point was, that is a video game, whose whole point was to learn how to resist the marshmallow test. And it was in that context that Jerome Kagan, the famous Harvard Emeritus professor of psychology, said to me, yes, but the danger is that it's like Head Start. It's quick, you go through the video game, and then it doesn't last. Right. Because it's not a 1-week process, it's a 4-year process. Other questions? You have one, so please come up.
I just wanted to make a couple of comments. Basically, I think as children, or as a child myself, we didn't call it delayed gratification, but what I experienced was, if you eat all of your food, you get dessert. If you clean your room, you get to go outside. If you do your homework, you get to watch television. Back then, we just called it, you just do what your mom tells you. And the consequences for not doing so was also a motivating factor. And the other comment was in regards to the diamond in the rough. The most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life, or one of the most amazing things, is my wife is Hispanic. And I've seen babies that are barely talking, respond equally to both English and Spanish at the same time.
Yeah.
So anybody, like you said, could learn things if they're able to maintain that type of contact, be exposed to that type of environment, and we kind of lose touch with those environments. What we learn at home is not necessarily what we learn in school, and vice versa. So I just want to make that.
Right. I guess just to like add on to that, two things. I guess to the first one, it's just, a lot of kids who are growing up in these like working class and like low income neighborhoods don't have, sometimes, parents are working 2 jobs, or you have people like going to school and doing all that stuff. So sometimes you don't necessarily have the parent figure telling you, clean your room so you can do that, etc. So I feel like that's also like maybe why I struggled with it, because like my parents had moved from Ecuador and they were, busy trying to like make sure that we had a place to live, so I didn't necessarily have someone telling me like, go clean your room, which is why like I'm really grateful to KIPP for helping me do that. And then to your second comment, which was, sorry.
The way babies.
Yeah, it's right. It's just you got to make sure that yes, I totally agree with you. It's a very impressive thing as long as you have someone in the right like environment like helping support you through that. So.
And I have one last comment, which is when somebody says to me, gee, I have a lot of problem with a foreign language, I can't learn foreign languages. I say, I can't learn French. And I say to them, but retarded people in France learn French. How hard could it possibly be? Now, it's easier when you're a kid, there's no question. Gets harder, but it's as much, the difficulty is as much the embarrassment of not being able to do it as it is everybody can learn a language. What kid do you know who can't speak at least some language? And then if you can learn one, by every possible piece of evidence you could learn another. I think that we should wrap it up here, don't you think?
No more questions. So I want to thank you again for coming. Of course, thank you to our speakers and to Professor Solomon. George Ramirez, a great role model, actually told us a lot.